The mansion was silent except for the baby's cries. Imani, a black maid with tired eyes and trembling hands, rocked a feverish infant against her chest. The bottle had burned him. His tiny body shook with pain. Without thinking, instinct took over. She unbuttoned her blouse and brought him close. The baby latched, calmed, and for the first time that night breathed easily. Then the door burst open. Ethan, the billionaire owner, stood frozen in shock. His face twisted from confusion to fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he roared. His voice cracked the silence like thunder. Imani flinched but didn't move. "He couldn't breathe," she whispered. "He needed comfort." "Comfort?" Ethan snapped. "You dare touch my child? You filthy." The word burned more than the slap she expected but didn't receive. His rage filled the nursery, drowning reason. The baby whimpered. Sensing the storm, Imani's heart pounded. She laid him gently back in the crib, her eyes wet. "I saved him," she whispered. "You're fired." Ethan spat. "Get out of my house." Imani left without looking back, her uniform damp with tears and milk, stepping into the cold night, where no one saw the pain behind her silence. If this already made your blood boil, hit like and subscribe right now, because stories like this are still happening, and the world needs to hear them. The wind outside bit through Imani's thin coat as she walked home. Her hands trembled, clutching the small bag of clothes she'd carried out of that mansion. Inside her tiny apartment, the silence hit harder than the cold. One picture hung crooked on the wall. Her baby boy, Malik, gone 3 months now, the same age as the child she'd just held. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at the milk stain on her uniform. Her heart ached in rhythms she couldn't silence. Every sound, the creak of the floor, the hum of the heater, became echoes of a cry she could no longer answer. When Malik had died, she swore she'd never hold another child again. But instinct doesn't ask permission. It just acts, especially when life is slipping away in your arms. That night in the mansion, she hadn't thought about rules or race or lines she wasn't supposed to cross. She had only seen a baby gasping for air. Imani picked up a pen and a scrap of paper from her nightstand. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she began to write, "I'm sorry if my actions scared you. I only wanted to help him breathe." She folded the note but didn't send it. Morning light spilled through the wide glass windows of the stone mansion. Ethan sat at the dining table, staring at his untouched coffee. The echoes of last night clung to him. Her trembling voice, that baby's fading cry, the way she'd said, "I save him." Dolores, the old housekeeper, moved quietly around him. She'd worked there longer than he'd been alive. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm and edged. "You think money makes you see everything, Mr. Stone, but you were blind last night." Ethan frowned. "Don't start, Dolores." "I will," she said firmly. "That woman kept your boy alive while you were too angry to notice." Her words hit him like a slap. Ethan rose, pushing back his chair. "You didn't see what she did." "I did," Dolores replied. "And so did the camera in the nursery." Hours later, Ethan stood alone, watching the footage on the security monitor. The baby crying, kicking the bottle away. The maid's panic, her soft voice pleading her decision. Desperate but gentle. He watched his son finally calm, safe in her arms. His throat tightened. Guilt crawled up his spine. "What have I done?" he whispered, lowering his head into his hands. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt small. If this happened right in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you want justice as much as I do, hit subscribe. 2 days later, Imani's doorbell rang. She hesitated before opening it and froze. Ethan stood there, not in his tailored suit, but in a gray sweater and tired eyes that looked nothing like the man who'd screamed at her. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. She stepped aside but said nothing. The small apartment smelled of coffee and sorrow. Ethan looked around, then at her. "I watched the footage," he began. "I saw everything. You saved my son. I was wrong." Imani's arms crossed. "Wrong doesn't fix what you said." He nodded, eyes heavy with shame. "I know, I've spent years thinking power meant control. You showed me it can mean care. Silence filled the room. Not anger, just the weight of truth. I'm not here to offer a job, Ethan said. I'm asking for forgiveness and a chance to make it right. Imani exhaled slowly. If I come back, I won't be invisible. I want respect, not pity. He met her gaze. On your terms. For the first time, she saw a man instead of a monster. Maybe, just maybe, he saw her too. News of Imani's return spread through the mansion like wildfire. The staff whispered. Some called her brave. Others called it foolish. But the loudest voice came from Ethan's own mother, Eleanor, who arrived that afternoon with polished pearls and sharp words. You've lost your mind, she snapped. Rehiring a maid who crossed that line? What will people say? Ethan stood firm. They'll say I did what was right. Right? She scoffed. You think charity erases shame? This isn't charity, Mother, he replied. It's justice. For a moment, the woman who taught him pride looked at him and saw something she couldn't control, empathy. She turned away, defeated by a softness she didn't understand. Downstairs, Imani carried herself differently now. Not as help, but as someone who belonged. The baby reached for her every time she entered, laughing in a way that filled the whole house. Even Dolores smiled again. But beyond those walls, people whispered. A black maid and a billionaire. The scandal wrote itself. Paparazzi flashes caught glimpses of them in the garden. Ethan didn't hide anymore. He walked beside her, unbothered by cameras. Imani watched him once, surprised. You're not afraid? He shook his head. Not anymore. The only shame is staying silent when you know what's right. Weeks passed, and the mansion no longer felt cold. Laughter replaced whispers. The baby, now stronger, reached out for Imani every morning, his little fingers curling around her with trust. She smiled again, not as a servant, but as a mother figure. Ethan watched from the doorway, a quiet witness to something money could never buy. Her warmth had changed the rhythm of that house, and of him. For years, he had counted value in profits and shares, but now he measured it in heartbeats and moments of peace. One evening, he found Imani sitting by the fire, sketching something in a worn notebook. What's that? He asked. She looked up. An idea. A place where women like me, mothers, nurses, nannies, can care for children safely without judgment. I'd call it the Haven. Ethan nodded slowly. Then we'll build it. Her eyes widened. You mean it? I do, he said softly. Because this world needs more of you, not less. That night, they drew plans together on the kitchen table. 2 different lives, one shared purpose. The mansion that once represented power and distance was turning into something new, a place of healing, born from forgiveness and courage. Spring sunlight poured through the tall windows of the new center. They built together the Haven. The air buzzed with children's laughter and music. Mothers gathered, sharing stories and hope. Imani stood near the entrance, holding the same baby she'd once saved, now smiling and healthy. Ethan took the stage, his voice trembling with humility. This place exists because of her, he said, pointing toward Imani. I once judged her for an act of love. Today I call her family. She didn't just save my son, she saved me. The crowd applauded, but Imani's eyes filled quietly with tears. Not from pride, from peace. She had lost once, but she had gained purpose beyond measure. After the ceremony, Ethan walked beside her through the garden where it had all begun. I used to think power meant being feared, he said softly. Now I know it means being human. Imani smiled. And being human means loving without permission. He nodded. Exactly. They stopped by the fountain, the baby's laughter echoing between them. Proof that healing is louder than hate. If you believe this should never happen again, share this now. And to my USA, UK, and Canadian viewers, your voice is power. Use it.